I think there are 4 tests to ask ourselves. I think these are really good tests as to whether or not we are exercising our ethical muscle. The sleeping test. If I do this, can I sleep at night? The newspaper test. Would I still do this if it was published in a newspaper? The mirror test. Can I feel comfortable looking at myself in the mirror? And the teenager test. Would I mind my children knowing about this? And I just want to go on to miss the next slide out. Just go on to the last bit here. Yeah. I visited Jordan about 6 months ago. I don't know whether you know about Jordan. It's got no oil. It's not a very rich country. And it has a population of about 9.5 million. And about 2.5 million of those are refugees. So about a quarter of the population are refugees. And they're coming in their thousands and their millions from Syria. And I asked the Jordanians that I met, how do you feel about this? And they said, well, these are our neighbors. We've got to help them. I said, well, how do you feel about their children? And said, we've got to educate them. And this is a quote from Queen Rania, who I met. She said, does my husband order his soldiers to close the borders? How is he going to sleep at night? It was never a question of yes or no. It was always a question of how we're going to make it work. Principled leadership in a challenging environment. So I'm challenging you really to say, are you flexing your ethical muscle? Have you reminded yourself what your true principles are? No one can make you do something that's not right. You don't have to be Martin Luther King or Mother Teresa to be a principled person. You just have to do the right thing. You just have to do the right thing. And I believe all over the country, school leaders are doing the right thing. They are showing acts of kindness. They're showing love and care to the children and people that they're serving. And it's really, really important that we carry on doing that. And these people who are doing this, they may not be famous head teachers. They may not have knighthoods or damehoods. They mightn't have thousands of followers on Twitter. They're just hidden heroes. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And there's a lovely quote from Leonard Cohen, who died last year, saying, there are heroes in the seaweed. There are children in the morning. They're leading out for love, and they will lead in that way forever. And those leaders are the heroes in the seaweed, responding to the request of the children. And Nelson Mandela, when he was in prison for 27 years, there was a poem that kept him going over the many years of imprisonment. And it was called Invictus. Out of the night that covers me, black as a pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishment the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. We as leaders have to be captains of our soul in these challenging times. Thank you.
I'll just sit beside. You can be the rose between two thorns.
That's all right, okay.
So, two immensely interesting, impressive, and substantial contributions we've had from David and Steve now. And I'm sure many of you have got questions about both of them, or comments or feedback, and it would be good to have a conversation. If you can just do a show of hands in a minute, and I will take questions. But before I take questions from you, let me just say there's a couple of things to ask you. David, I'm going to start with you. We've heard a strong piece there from Steve about the moral purpose and holding fast to our ethical compass, our own ethical compass. You've got a moral purpose for the system. How do you see what you're doing at the moment and what you've been talking to us about today as supporting that? How is that going to help a really morally driven and effective system?
Because I think it's underpinned by integrity. I think that's the first thing I'd say. I think the challenge that we sometimes face as school leaders is that we make judgments about people's leadership capability by the end result. And the end result sometimes, when we just look at the numbers, belies the quality of the individual's decision-making and process that led to that. So I think that's the first thing I'd say. But I also worry that in the quest to do the straight line rapid school improvement, the turnaround in 6 weeks, 6 months.
Category B.
There are C actually.
C.
There is no, you're right, there is B. Well
B,
done, yeah, it's B.
Yeah.
There is a risk that the children who need that quality of education most don't get it, because they are the casualties of that drive. So what I hope is coming through what I've been describing today is that this is about giving leaders time to make the right decisions rather than putting them under such pressure that they have to run really hard at the problem and make the wrong decisions, which they know instinctively in their hearts are the wrong ones to do, but their heads say we've got to get ourselves out of trouble. And that's the conflict, I think, between the two. And the experience, I've had a wonderful experience of headship and being a CEO, and the challenges of getting a school from special measures to good are every bit as hard as keeping a school outstanding, but they're different. But what unites them, I think, is the belief that you have to have as a leader that fundamentally your colleagues come to school every day to do a good job, and your job is to help them, that your children don't come to school to wreck it, they come to learn, and that actually, because you are in a people industry surrounded by human beings, everybody has different days where it feels good and it feels bad, and you have to recognize that as part of your leadership.
And Steve talked about, the whole recognition that is beginning to emerge that the system we've devised sometimes puts school interests, and you alluded to it, ahead of children's interests. And you said, those Category B schools do exist. There are those rapid improvers, but you can't build a system around them. Haven't we, to some extent, tried to do just that?
Yeah.
Haven't they been held up as the examples that everyone else should follow?
And then you believe your own publicity, or drink your own bathwater. I love that. And I think what's often happened in some cases, that success and that improvement in those organisations has come at the cost of the school down the road. And I think what I'm trying to say here is that particularly in the work that I do with MATs, and clearly, in terms of the knowledge I've got on my role, I see more of that than anybody else does. We need multi-academy trusts to make the right decisions for children in their entire community, not just their own children. And that goes back to Steve's point, that fundamentally that's about the governance. And if you've got a board where the CEO is running the governing body, you have a challenge on that. So we really need strong people who can manage the principled ethical leadership and challenge the decisions of leaders in the organisation that may not fit that bill.
Steve, your reaction to David's 8 categories things, do you recognise in there that there is the potential for creating a morally driven and effective system?
Yeah, I really welcome the analysis that David's done on this, and I've said so when it first came out. It's because I think the analysis from an Ofsted judgment is just so shallow compared to what's really going on in schools. And I think we tend to declare victory and defeat too early. We declare school as great success or a great failure after 2 or 3 years, when actually that's the wrong time to be thinking about it. And this is the point that David's bringing out really strongly here. And you think about the stuff about the surgeons in the research, they have very quick wins, but then it doesn't last. So one of the mistakes I made, I've made many mistakes, but one of the mistakes I made when I was chief exec at the National College is that we pinned too much emphasis on outstanding Ofsted grades for NLE status and for teaching schools. It turns out that there are some great heads who run effective schools, but not very good at helping other schools. It turns out there are some good schools who are really good at helping other schools, and that we put too much store on this kind of Ofsted grade to decide when a school was ready to help another school. And again, this has come through well in David's approach. So there's much more potential in that more sophisticated analysis to have a more moral approach to school leadership.
And does it carry risks in your view, Steve?
Well, carry risk if you start grading yourself against the 8 categories
Yeah.
instead of against the 4 Ofsted categories. And people start sort of using it to label schools inappropriately. But I think it's got more potential than risks.
Okay, let's see if we've got any questions from the floor yet. Hello? Go on, Pat.
Hi, that's Maud. I think, we're all here because we live in Birmingham, obviously, and we believe in BEP. There's a lot of people not here that I think we need to acknowledge. I think if we were to have sort of bird's eye view of the city, Marshall's Land or something,
Yeah.
and look at the city, it's just going to seem like a whole set of random organisations, some being very effective, others maybe less so, some really good collaborations, others less so. BEP trying to pull that together. You both do, work for and with BEP, I know you do. What would be your view in sort of 3 to 5 years' time of how you would hope to see BEP really impacting on the city?
Great question.
Very good question. Did everybody hear it, by the way? Yeah? Everybody?
Use my head teacher voice if you want.
I think you already did, Pat. I think they heard it. Who's going first? David?
Yeah, I'll have a go. So if we take 5 years, one of the indicators that BEP has had the impact that I know it's trying to create and is creating is that the city doesn't need it anymore. Because in 5 years' time, there is no such thing as an isolated left-behind school. And that every school in the city, as a result of the work that BEP does, is linked in and